Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another LinkedIn Live. Today, I have the honor and the privilege to have Calvin here with me as a guest. And the topic that we will be talking about, the advantage of adversity, is something that's very, very close to my heart. But Calvin, I would like to first ask you, like, say hi and ask you to just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience.
Hey, well, I'm Calvin Wayman. Thanks so much for having me, my man. Super excited to be here. Um, I think the very best way that I like to introduce myself, especially as people dig deep into my stuff or before they do, is I'm just a regular dude. I'm in this same game of life trying to go at it. So a conventional slash traditional dude with maybe a non-traditional background and upbringing. Uh, Providence saw to it that I had a very interesting way of coming to this planet. So I was actually born into uh, a strict polygamist religion. I'm one of 45 kids. I have 44 brothers and sisters in one family. Uh, One dad, four moms, and yeah, and throughout my entire life was just homeschooled and didn't step foot into a public school until I was 20 years old. And it's just been quite the journey going from being the stepping foot inside of public school for the first time to leaving the bubble that I was born into to being an entrepreneur to doing things to challenge myself and push myself to grow and just trying to figure out life like everyone else and to see how I can leave the place a little bit better than I found it. So that's me in a nutshell.
Lovely. I mean, wow, 54 brothers and
Yeah,
sisters.
maybe we didn't. Did I say 54? 45. Sorry.
Oh,
So one of 40.
okay.
So I'm one of 45. I only have 44 siblings, not 54. Only only 44.
Okay. Are you somewhere in the middle or
I'm considered one of the older kids because I am the 11th of the
okay,
bunch.
okay,
So,
okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, I'm the only child.
Ah,
So I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum.
yeah.
Well, wow, that's really amazing. I mean, gosh, I can't even imagine. I mean, I was this spoiled little child, and you probably had to fight for everything among.
Fight for attention. Yeah, there was like, by the way, I just have to preface this because when I've started to share this more, there is not a single question that you can ask. That's inappropriate. I'm an open book on what it was like or how it all worked. But yeah, you had to definitely fight for adults' attention. One of the good things was certainly with that many brothers and sisters, you were never alone, right? Uh, Grew up on a small family farm, so got to figure out how to work hard and like milk cows, plant, be patient, grow a garden, and everything. But yeah, with it came its unique set of challenges, especially ones that I didn't know at the time were like invisible mental barriers, that I didn't learn until I stepped out of the bubble much later in life. So yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Okay. Well, my adversity in the childhood was I was the only child. I had
Mm-hmm.
two grandmas, two grandpas, and my parents taking care of me and just giving me anything. I
Oh
never
yeah.
cleaned. I never had to do anything. And my life was perfect until my father died. And then I woke up
Mm.
being 23 years old into the real life, not even knowing how to wake up to an alarm clock. So my future book will have the first chapter of my future book will be not so perfect childhood, because that
Mm.
perfection really, really had a mark later on, even with me owning it up to all the failures, because I was always told how amazing I am. Like, even if even if I got an F in high school, I was still amazing. I never had to work for anything. And of course, when things happened to me, if it was good, that was all me, and if it was something bad, that can't be me, because I'm so perfect. And
Oh
that
man.
kept coming up until that almost suicide moment. But today's interview is not about me, it's
But
about
that's
you.
super interesting. Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that.
yeah, but sometimes even the most perfect childhood can be later on huge adversity that I had to overcome, and I had to learn as an adult how to do things where you knew all of that since a young age, how to work for this, work for that, wake up, and just things that are completely normal to majority of kids were like something unusual to me. But I want to first, hear your take on, like, so the topic is the advantage of adversity. And I
Mm.
get it. I mean, but can you like give us a little bit of explanation, a little bit of an intro into that?
Well, first of all, for anybody listening, it's one thing to listen and hear the word advantage of adversity, but in the midst of it, it sure doesn't feel like an advantage. There are so many times that uh, it feels gut wrenchingly hard. And if somebody just came to you when you were in the middle of a very tough moment or chapter in your life and said, "Oh, but this is such a good thing. This is going to be an advantage," you'd be like, "Screw you. What are you talking about?" And so I think it's just important to make put a point on that because it doesn't look pretty in the beginning. And I mean, there's been so many pieces of adversity from when I first went to college and had my eyes opened up that the world was a lot bigger than the bubble that I thought was reality, to when I left my day job 4 years ago and decided to become a full time entrepreneur. That's where I think adversity really opened up for me. So I remember when I quit my day job, I went to do door to door sales in Southern California. And I thought that because that was something I always wanted to do, I knew it would be tough, but I thought it would be amazing. But there are so many stories that came out of the door to door sales thing. In fact, if you want me to share one of them, I could.
Yes,
But
please.
okay, so this is when I realized that adversity probably, like, if you can get through it, has so many benefits that you can't even begin to calculate. So when I started doing the door to door thing, I moved my wife and my 1 year old out to California with no guarantees. I signed my name on a lease that was 3 times the amount that I was used to paying. We left all family and everything that we knew. We left our comfort, right? And before I started doing the door to door by myself, I did a couple weeks of training, and the training went well. We got a deal every single day. Now, granted, we still dealt with a lot of rejection because we were knocking like 45 to 70 doors a day and maybe getting one deal on average. So you're still dealing with a lot of rejection. So it's important that you get at least one deal, though, to keep going. But now that I moved there and I put all of the chips on this one move that I'm going to figure this out. And I start knocking day one, thinking that I'm excited for this new adventure. I'm now an entrepreneur. I've averaged at least one deal during the 2 weeks of training. I'm going to crush this now that it's for real. But I go out there day one and hit 45 ish doors. And guess how many deals I end up with? Might be a big shocker, right? Zero.
Uh, okay.
Zero. Like that was a big hit to my ego because I was like, what? That's not how this is supposed to work. Anyway, I'm like, well, I know sales is a numbers game. So I go out there again on day two and say, well, I averaged one. So if I didn't get any on day one, but my average is at least one a day, then on the next day, I'm going to be due for two, right? Because the numbers just have to work out. So I go out there again. I work just as hard, hit 45 to 50 doors. And on that day, I end with zero. Now, at this point, I'm starting to like freak out a little bit. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, am I saying the script wrong? Am I coming across as desperate? What's going on? I'm just selling solar, by the way, for anybody that's in their head saying, what were you selling? Solar. Um, but I didn't know what the heck was happening. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to just try to shake it off. And I go out there on the third day and hit it hard again. And again, I'm going door after door after door. And I end the day not with 3 deals, not with 2, and not with more. Another 0. Big
Okay.
fat goose egg. So this is the point where I start to question everything. I literally had left everything in Utah to come here to Southern California. This is what I'm going through in my head, and it's supposed to work. I felt like I was following my calling. And why is it not working? This is so crazy. And I started to be so afraid and so filled with anxiety. But then I started to be like, well, what can I do? The only thing I can do is if I can go out there again on day 4. But again, I'm filled with so much fear and anxiety on day 3. But here's where it gets interesting. Now let's go to day 4. Still 0. Then to day 5. Still 0.
Okay.
Day 6. 0. Day 7. 0. I'm now 7 days with zilch, with rent coming due and bills to pay, and I have nothing to show for it. Like, I flipped my stuff on that 7th day. Now, as crazy as all this sounds, everything I've just mentioned so far is just the setup to what I now call my darkest day.
Okay.
And you'll see why in
It's
a
the
second.
day, the eighth day.
Um, I think it's still on the 7th day, just to be specific. So I've gone 7 days. It's on my 7th day. So 6 days of 0, and then I'm on day 7, and I'm still at 0. And I will never forget because I go to this gentleman's house, and first of all, I got to give him the whole pitch, which was a huge win because everybody else, and like, if they just heard the word solar, they had 15 other people that came to their door that month, so they just slammed the door in your face, right? And so they didn't want to hear that. But this guy, I got to give a whole pitch, and that was a win. And then he said something that I was not expecting because of how the days were going, and he said, "This sounds awesome. Let's do it." And so he did it. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And so I'm like, take down his information. And I'm like, yes, finally, after 7 days. Yeah, I should have at least 7 deals right now. But this is like just a glimmer of hope. It can happen. Right. And I start to just feel so much better. The pressure starts to leave. And one of the last things I have to do after somebody agrees to do the solar thing that I was doing is I just had to get on the phone and get with like what we called the public utility credit check because they were essentially going to get solar for free just by replacing their current payments to solar payments. And we just had to make sure they had good history of paying their payments on time. So I get on the phone, I give him Frank's information, was his name, give him his address, and then all I have to do is hand the phone back to Frank, and he just has to confirm, yes, that's my name, yes, that's my address, and we're done. I hand Frank the phone, and he says, you know what? I don't actually want to do any sort of check like this right now. Yeah, let's just go ahead and cancel everything. So, like, all of a sudden, like, I just remember looking up from my notebook and I'm like, what the heck is he doing? So he's like canceling it. I go and grab the phone from Frank out of his hands and I'm like, dude, bro, like, we're done. Like, we're good. All you got to do is just confirm with them that, yes, that's my name. Yes, that's my phone number. And this is my address, and we're good. And I'm out of here. And then I hand the phone back to Frank, and he's just holding the phone up to his ear, and it's just dead silence. One of the most awkward 15 seconds of my life. And then he gets back on the phone with the person and says, "You know what? Calvin talked me back into it. I'm going to do it. But I hope your CEO is listening to this because I just don't think you should do a check at this point, especially if it could affect your credit. Then he says, actually, you know what? As I say this, I've talked myself out of it. I'm serious this time. Cancel everything and send me an email confirmation showing me that you canceled it. Click. And he handed me the phone and he said, sorry, dude. And I had to leave. So here we are, 7 days, just working my face off. And even when I think I get something, it it's like it get ripped from me is what it felt like. I was so distraught. I was like, if this is what life is supposed to be like when you're going after your dreams and going like doing what you feel like you're supposed to do, I don't know if I can do this. And I started to leave, but as soon as I was driving, a couple faces popped in my head, and it was my wife and my 1-year-old son. And I was like, where am I going? I can't leave. Like, I have a wife and a 1-year-old at home. The only thing that's worse than leaving or than experiencing this right now is if I do leave, I have absolutely zero chance. And so I turned back around and I continued knocking the rest of the day. And just like everything else, it didn't look very bright. At the end of the day, I got somebody just like Frank who said yes. And also, just like Frank, canceled at the public utility credit check. So it's dark, and now for real, I have to leave. And I'll just never forget this because I went in my car and I just lost it. I started screaming. It was such a mixture of emotions. I can't even explain it. It was dark, it was sadness, it was anger, it was confusion. And I just started screaming at God and the universe like something I would have never done before. And I was just like, what does this mean? You know, part of my language, but this is what I said. I was like, I'm working my ass off. Like, they say that most of success is just showing up. I'm showing up. What's going on? And I started to leave the neighborhood. And when I was leaving, I had this interesting thought. And the thought that crossed my mind was, Calvin, go back to Frank's house. And I was like, what? Why would I go back to Frank's house? He's the one that started this whole mess. And besides, he already said no. And then it occurred to me, yeah, he already said no. So what more do you have to lose? And I went back to Frank's house. I rang his doorbell. I remember his face. It was dark at this point. He flipped his light on and he comes out and steps in the light. And I give him what's probably the world record's worst close on door to door ever. And I just say, Frank, why don't you just do this? And Frank starts to smile. And this is such a fun thing for me because then he steps out and he says, you know what, Calvin? I'm going to do it. Now I was really confused. I was like, what? What did you just say? He says, I'm going to do it, and I'll tell you why. At this point, it has nothing to do with solar, has nothing to do with the credit check. I'm going to do it, and it's because of you. He says, I'm an older guy, and I've been around a time or two, and I know that the people that truly succeed in life are the ones that can face adversity, that don't quit, and never give up. And because you're still here, you've probably been here all afternoon, right? Yep. Because you didn't quit, because you came back, I'm going to give you the order. And he did, for real, that time. And it was just such a crazy moment for me. I just remember it even got a little bit crazier right at the end because I remember taking some notes and stuff right at the end, and I was almost crying. I was in a very solemn mood, and he came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and made me look up to him. And then he said this, almost as though he was sitting in my car freaking out. He looked at me and he said, Calvin, Yes, I know you're working your ass off, but don't quit. Keep going. Just never give up. And that day taught me a lot of things. That day is what made me realize, first of all, the entire experience of going through all that struggle and all that pain taught me how much more powerful I really was, how much strength I had, how much ability I had to go through things. It also made me realize that when you have the ability to just make a decision that you're going to get through something, then things start to click. Now, things didn't click right away, but making that decision, it did. And a silver lining was on the other side. And I did end up making more money the next month than I'd ever made in my entire life. And my first 6 figures that year because of that experience, because of that moment. And again, this is something that I've carried with me in every other endeavor that I've done, entrepreneurial endeavors, uh, doing things to see what happens if I could run a 50-mile ultra marathon, which is 2 marathons in a row, and just trying to push the limit of what I can do and create. But again, so many benefits from the strength that you didn't realize that you had to becoming self-aware and realizing, getting clear on yourself what you're really about and what it is that you're here to accomplish. So that was the day that I really learned adversity, what it feels like in a deep way, but also the benefits that can come along with it.
That's a really, really nice and powerful story. Um, one story that always, whenever I wanted to quit, so I was a failure, I am a failure, and all of that, but I never was a quitter, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and
Man, that's
and
such a good line. Yeah.
and every time when I was, like this close to quitting, I always remember the story of Colonel Sanders. And,
Mm.
I can imagine, he's a bit chubby, 60-ish, driving that Toyota Corolla from the 70s, all around the US, sleeping in the car, and 1,000 and I think 18 or 19 restaurants said no to him. And then I say to myself, like, you are 30, you are 35, and now I'm 40-ish, and so on, and you can't go past 50 no's, 100 no's, 200 no's. Come on, you know and that's really something that has kept me going every time when I faced adversity. And the second thing
So good.
is the poem by Charles Bukowski, All the Way. And every time I just go to YouTube, I put it on, and just that voice and the eerie music, it just brings those chills. And I just go all the way. If why
I don't know
bother?
if I've ever heard of that poem. I'm going to check it out. Charles Bukowski?
Yes, all the way.
I'm going to make a note of that because I'm all for finding stuff like that to get you back on the wagon
Yeah,
when it happens.
it says, like, if you're not gonna go all the way, then why even try? Why even start?
Mm.
So
Yes.
yeah, a very powerful poem, short but very powerful. I mean, I get chills every time I listen to it. So those are my two go-to things whenever I'm this close to quitting. But yeah, like, very powerful story. I mean, I can relate to it in many different ways throughout my journey, and I'm sure you had more stories like this. Not just this one. Maybe that was the most powerful one.
It was the deepest one, but truth be told, like there's definitely been other ones in different ways of challenging. This year even has had its different set of challenging challenges, creating my own like types of online products, not just having an online business that's serving people, but trying to take the emotional hits of failing, of having products that you put your heart, sweat, and blood into, and it doesn't take off as much, and things aren't always clicking. Yeah, the life of entrepreneurship, you know, you get practice. You get
Yes.
practice a lot with facing adversity and seeing if you're going to stick with it.
Yes. Um, what would, like, I mean, my whole audience here on LinkedIn are entrepreneurs, new
Awesome.
entrepreneurs, seasoned entrepreneurs, 9-figure, 10-figure entrepreneurs, and so on. So, what would you say are some tips, tricks, suggestions, advice from your end, other than never quit, that entrepreneurs should use on their journey when they are faced with adversity?
There's a couple of things that have really helped me when I hit the point where I just want to quit. And as you said, I love the line that you said, something around the lines of that you've failed a lot, like you're a failure, but you're not a quitter. But what do you do when you feel like your back is up against the wall and you just can't go anymore? Um, I remember when I was going for my 50 miler. That's like this huge goal, 2 marathons in a row. I'd never even run a marathon before. And I remember at around mile 29, maybe 26, I collapsed. I like I just couldn't go anymore. My knees gave out. And just to keep a long story short, I remember being so excited saying, I think I'm going to do this. I've heard that some people have done 50 miles before. So many people have like this huge goal to run a marathon. So I'm just going to run two because I think I can. But when I was in that moment, the thought of climbing this big mountain was not going to happen. And if I was thinking of crossing the finish line, then I would have wanted to quit even sooner. And when I was collapsed there and when I picked myself back up and I was thinking about quitting, I asked myself, well, I can't see myself crossing the finish line today, but am I completely done? Am I completely done in this moment? And the truth was, I wasn't. And so I did something, what I now call reducing it to the ridiculous. What's the smallest thing that I can do in the forward direction? And so I remember looking up and seeing a tree and said, well, I'm going to go to that tree. And I did. And then I went to the next tree and I did. And before I knew it, I all of a sudden started to get this momentum. And somewhere out of nowhere, I got this new wind. Like it felt like I had a new set of running harder and faster than I'd ever run in my entire life for 13 miles straight. And that 13 miles was enough to get me over the hump to make me realize, holy crap, I'm doing it. But it started from me saying, I'm going to go to that tree. And that day, I ran 50 miles, but I wouldn't
uh,
have it in that moment. So,
Calvin,
yeah.
just let me make sure one thing. Hey guys, welcome back. So yeah, a little glitch on the side of LinkedIn, but we are back. And Calvin, before we were disrupted, you were talking about the marathon experience and that
Yeah.
moment where you started negotiating with yourself, with your mind, to the point of when the mind just gives up and says, well, you know what, I can go to that tree. So
Yes.
yeah, please.
Yeah. So I think we all hit into these moments where we feel like we're completely done, especially when we're going after a goal that was important to us and then it seems hopeless. Like it seems like you don't see how you're going to get to that. You don't know how you're going to get to the top of that mountain. And I felt that way when I collapsed in that ultra marathon. But then I realized I wasn't completely. And so I was like, I'm going to go to that tree and the next tree. And then I built up momentum, got a fresh set of legs, ran harder than I've ever run in my life for 13 miles. And at the end of that day, I finished running 50 miles, 2 marathons in a row. And the lesson there is something that I call reduce to the ridiculous. And that is, and like when you're in that very painful moment of adversity, what's the smallest thing that you can conceive of that is a forward motion? Because if you can get to that point, then perhaps you'll just get into this thing called momentum, and then it can get you through it. So that's one of the things that has helped me. The second thing I would say for anybody that's looking to break through something that feels challenging, I say become a member of the CIA. Every successful person we know is a member of the CIA. Now, before you think I'm going into conspiracy theory territory, I don't mean the Secret Service. CIA to me stands for consistent imperfect action. And this is just something that helps me like crazy also, because sometimes when things feel stuck, we are our own worst critic and we want it to look a perfect certain way. But every single person that we know has been willing to do something, even if it looks wrong or fall flat on their face. And as long as you can get into the mode where you're taking consistent, imperfect action with emphasis on imperfect, then you can't help but win.
Awesome, awesome, really good advice. I look at it kind of in similar way. I just call it permanent beta. Everything I do is in
Yeah,
permanent beta, so it's just the mindset of always learning, always growing.
I
But
love that.
yeah, but it says a similar thing.
Totally.
Calvin, you are an online entrepreneur.
Yes.
What do you do? Who do you serve? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I serve entrepreneurs. So I have a program called Debt Free Entrepreneur, and I help entrepreneurs get their money right. And so that's the first thing. And then I have a couple other things that I'm playing with. I have a social media agency, mostly for network marketers. So I help people in, yeah, I'm sure you have that industry in your
Yes.
country, but there's a lot of people that are in the network marketing space that have been doing it like old school for a long time, where they're getting new customers, just need an A face to face, and that's great. But we have this thing called the internet now, and this thing called social media. So I help online entrepreneurs, particularly in the network marketing space, develop a social media brand and a personal brand, and then start growing their business through the power of social media.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. So two things. And where can people find you?
The very best place to get a hold of me, where I hang out the most, is Instagram. So if
Okay.
anyone's on Instagram, you can go give me a thumbs up in the DMs, and I'd know you came from this. But yeah, it's just Calvin Wayman over on Instagram.
Cool. And um, do you have any free resources that? And I
Actually,
mean,
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because yeah, because this is live. So literally a few hours ago, so I just started something where, so I have my book Fish Out of Water, and we just hit our 3-year anniversary on Fish Out of Water. How to go from awkward to awesome. It's a book, talks a lot about adversity. Um, but I just barely decided for the 3-year anniversary that I'm giving the book away for free. So I'm giving away the audiobook. So if somebody would like the audiobook of Fish Out of Water, they can go to calvinwayman.com/free. Again, it's just at calvinwayman.com/free. I'm giving away the book for free on audio. So yeah, if anybody
um,
wants to go deeper, that's the
I
way to go.
mean, I mean, if it's not too much bother after we finish this, if you can drop the link in the comments so that they, because this is a
Yeah,
replay as well, and most people
totally.
watch it on the replay so that they can go to that. Well, Calvin, you've shared an amazing story, two stories, and through that storytelling, you gave a whole lot of advice already. But before I let you go, my oh, you're back. Yeah, there's something definitely with the internet, but you're back. So before I let you go, I really want to just ask you, like, that's that you feel like sharing with the audience.
Yeah. So keeping the theme of everything that we've talked about, I think the thing to keep in mind is things that get us into forward motion versus just staying stuck and stagnant. Because fear's job is not to scare you; it's to freeze you. And adversity can be something that pops up and really makes us freeze. One of the things that has helped me, in addition to the things I've already mentioned, like joining the CIA, consistent imperfect action, and reducing it to the ridiculous, is the way that I think about decisions. And I love the thing about constant beta, but I think this will tack on top of it. A lot of times, first of all, we know that we need to make a decision to move forward, right? But many times we don't want to make a decision, or we delay on a decision for fear that we're going to make the wrong one. And a lot of times we start going after something and things don't go well, and we start to wonder, did I go down the right path? Did I do something wrong? Should I be doing this versus that? And I had a mentor tell me this early in my journey that has helped me like crazy. And he said, successful people don't worry if they make the right decision or not. Instead, they make the decision and then they make it right. So don't worry if you make the right decision or not. Instead, make the decision and then make it right. What that meant was, it wasn't the point of decision that was the end all be all. That got things moving. It was the focus, the energy, and the attention and intention that they put into that decision after it was made. It became its self-fulfilling prophecy. When you really understand that, then you don't have to look over your shoulder all the time. You can have the courage to do another beta test. You can test it, treat it as though it was the right decision, and focus on it and make it the right decision and get moving. So make the decision, then make it right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some very solid, very good advice. Because yeah, if you don't make a decision, you're just standing still. If you do decision, at least you're moving somewhere. And then, you know, with a little bit of measuring and KPIs and benchmarking, you can quickly figure out if it was the right one or not, and then you can pivot, change, polish, whatever you want. It's kind of like
Totally
what they say in marketing, growth hacking, just, you know, overall growth hacking of your business, I guess.
Yeah.
Calvin, it was an amazing pleasure to have you. I'm so sorry that we had that glitch in between, but yeah, hopefully people will go to part 1 and part 2. But I appreciate you a whole lot for sharing all of that. And I would just like to thank you and wish you a pleasant rest of your day. And the weekend is soon here, so a nice weekend as well. And all the best in your online entrepreneurial journey.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me, and for the listeners and those watching, best of luck on your endeavors as well.
Thank you. Take care. If you enjoyed this talk today and you want to see all the things happening, check out frameworkforfreedom.me.